We're excited. We're going to do something a little different today. We're at home chilling, vibing. So, for those of you who are joining us that may not already know, I do have a roommate, and my roommate is Jordan. Jordan and I, we live together now. He lived with me and my ex-husband as well. So we're like one big happy family. But now Jordan and I, we live together and we're the best of friends. And we also have some perspectives that we think would be really cool to share. So, oh hey, thanks for the messages, guys. So we're gonna try something a little different. We definitely want to hear from you. I can see it here on my iPad if you want to say some messages or anything like that, and Jordan can see them as well. So we're just going to talk about something, different topics from now on, just about like different things that from a woman and a perspective and from a male perspective, just to give you guys like, you know, some different options or views. And we're just going to have a kind of a casual dialogue, but we do want to hear from you guys as well. Mm-hmm. So Jordan, what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about vulnerability. Right.
Okay, so the first thing is, for anyone who is not well versed in what being vulnerable means, it's about whether or not you're letting your guard down, right? Yeah. Like the vibe on being able to, you know, open yourself up to a potential hurt. You know, when they think about warfare, is where they allow you to see your vulnerable spots, where your weaknesses are, and lie, so that way potentially people can attack. So it allows you to be vulnerable in that situation. Yep. And so what ends up happening a lot of times is like when we're vibing and we're trying to connect with other people, we sometimes don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable because we're afraid of what other people, you know, might think about us or how it can potentially negatively impact us too.
Right.
So Jordan, what does it mean to you in regards to what I was just talking about, to be vulnerable?
So pretty much as Jay was saying, when you're vulnerable, you're leaving yourself open or exposed. And I don't think we realize, but we all somewhat, like we have different degrees of vulnerability in my opinion. Like when we go into work, right? And let's say we had a long night out the night before and we're looking tired and someone says, hey, what's going on? What's wrong? And you says, oh, I had a long night, I'm tired. That's a degree of vulnerability right there. Like vulnerability isn't a very far out and complicated concept. It's really just being truthful and being open as opposed to being hidden and guarded. And so in some sort of way, we all we all act vulnerable and we all have a degree. And so basically what we're talking about today is potentially opening up even more and sharing with others, you know, more degrees of being vulnerable.
Exactly. And shout out to everybody who's joining. We appreciate you. We are trying something a little different where we just want to talk about some real topics, and we definitely want to hear from anybody who's on the live as well. It will be saved later for IGTV. If you cannot stay tuned in the whole time, no worries. We're going to save it because we're going to talk about some real deep information right now. So, Jordan, let me just ask you this question. Why is it so hard for men to be vulnerable?
You're right. So it's really society, right? So like when we grow up, and we always hear it all the time, a lot of times we tell men, you got to be tough. You got to be strong for your family. You know, if you're a son, you got to be strong. Like I grew up in a single parent household, so I had to be strong for my mother, who was a single mother, and my younger brother. Even if you do have a two-parent household, your dad, we come from a generation or generations where the dad had to be tough and, did not let the kids know what was going on if he was having issues at job or issues around the house. And so we've been trained for years and years to years for men not to open up because you being reclused and closed in was a sign of strength. When no one knows you and no one knows you intimately, especially as a man, that means you're not vulnerable. You're not open, so you can be guarded, you can be strong, and you don't have any chinks in your armor. And so, hearing that for years and years and years, passed down from grandfather to father to son to grandson, men have been told you got to be strong. And so it's been viewed to be vulnerable as being weak. And so I think it just stems right there. That's why a lot of men have a hard time opening up, because we were never allowed to open up, or a lot of generations didn't open up and didn't teach us to open up. So now we're learning, and this time, okay, how do I open up? Who do I open up to? Is it okay to open up? And so it's like a fear thing as well.
Okay, so I'm guilty of this. I'm originally from New York. Jordan's originally from Philly. Okay, so I'm a little guilty of this, of being like, what? That fool is crying? What? Why are you crying? Like, I need you to be strong. I need you to be a freaking soldier for me, right?
Right.
I'm guilty of this too, okay? I know I give off a little bit of a masculine energy, and we're going to talk about gender roles and how that plays into it as well. But, like, I realize that I sometimes have told my spouse, again, I'm divorced, told my spouse, like, to toughen up, and not realizing that I was even possibly, like, softening some of his feelings and like making it harder for him to be vulnerable with me, because he's like, I have to be tough all of the time. Right. And so what ended up happening was, you know, in turn, I also could have helped him be a little bit more vulnerable if I was vulnerable too. So that's the other thing, is that like sometimes society has created this shield, like, and I'm gonna just speak from women of color especially, where we cannot be vulnerable in the workplace, with our kids, with our families. You know, there's all these situations where we're not allowed to be vulnerable as even women of color that I'm dealing with, because now we're in a situation where we have to have this strong presence and like a can do it all ourselves.
Yep.
So, and if anybody in here can relate to like some of the things that we're talking about how hard it is to be vulnerable, like, please, like, share your experiences here. We want to know, because we're allowing ourselves to open up and be vulnerable and talk about some real ass conversations about what it's like. We want to hear from you guys too, because we know we're not the only ones that struggle with this, and it's been pressing on my heart for a minute. We've been talking about it a lot, and so to piggyback off of that, I'll give you an example. You know, we worked in Merrill together, right? That's how we met. We met in Merrill Lynch. And I remember, like, there was how me and Jordan met, right? And I'm such a tough exterior. Jordan saw me trip. He saw me trip down the stairs. And, okay, first off, it was going up the stairs. I was tripping up the stairs, which makes it actually, when you think about it now, it's actually really funny. But at the time, I didn't think it was funny. So I tripped going up the stairs because I was too busy on my phone walking. And all I heard is somebody laughing in the background. And I'm like, I look like, I know you ain't laughing at me. You gonna laugh before you even ask me if I'm okay, if I help myself up. And he ain't feel bad at all. He just laughed at me. But those things where I'm so worried about what somebody else thinks, instead of just brushing it off and being like, oh well, he laughed. Me, I'm so tough. I was like, yo, like, why are you laughing at me? And I got defensive. And that also keeps people from being so vulnerable with us, because when we get defensive, we're also like creating atmosphere where everybody's gonna be on the defense and no one will be on the offense and allow themselves to open up too.
Right.
So
that's definitely true.
And so Jordan actually avoided me for like months. He was like, "Who's this scary lady? She's crazy." And then finally, of course, for those who know, I love to volunteer. I got him roped in with volunteer work. So shout out to everybody who can relate on being vulnerable and things like that. I appreciate that. So Jordan, like, what do you think it is about the gender roles, about like, is there like a masculine energy that women can give off when they're not being too vulnerable? What do you think about that?
I don't want to even say it's masculine energy. It's just being like very reticent, very like closed in, almost to the point where you're like kind of standoffish. And I know there's always two points of view to everything. You can't be vulnerable to everybody, because unfortunately we live in a place where some people are selfish, some people don't know how to handle vulnerability. So you do have to watch out who you're vulnerable with. But I feel like all of us should have somebody that we can be vulnerable to, men and women. And, you know, for women who, you know, like Jay said, you know, from being from up north or certain parts of the country or even the world, you got to be tough. So it's hard for even you to be vulnerable. Or when someone's being vulnerable to you, it's like far-fetched, it's new, and it's like, why are you telling me this? Or, oh, you're emotional. You're showing your, you know, emotional side. I definitely experienced that before, where I was just telling, you know, a woman how I felt, and she was like, what? Like, what do you mean? Are you sad right now?
Did you
like,
cry? Did you cry in front of her?
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't cried in years. You know what's funny? How it sticks with you. I cried in front of a woman back when I was in college. I think it was, you know, I was in love back in the day, and it was like 2000, maybe 9, 10-ish, and I cried. And I remember it was a bad argument, but she made fun of me. I don't think I cried in front of anybody since. Like nobody's ever seen me cry, to the point where I was in another relationship, and the woman was like, "Do you ever cry? Like, do you ever show emotion?" And it was because I was so scarred because I was vulnerable, because, you know, to the woman, and she, you know, she made fun of me that I haven't, you know, I completely like held it in. So, you know, definitely, as far as men goes, women can be, you know, women can help us, you know, be more vulnerable by being open. And when we do express that, be understanding instead of saying, what are you doing? Why are you crying? Or I thought you were tough. Because being vulnerable is actually tough. To leave yourself open is actually, it takes an act of bravery.
Man, okay, wait. So let me just say, okay, I sometimes I feel I get tired of having to help the man be vulnerable though. Like, okay, here's my thing, all right? I have to be strong for, if I had kids, I ain't got no kids, but for those of you who have kids, I'm sure you can relate. I gotta be strong for the kids, right? I gotta be, if I'm working, I gotta be professionally strong. And then on top of it, now I gotta be lifting up the black man some more and then be like, oh, here, you can put your feelings on me. Nah, man, sometimes I be like, why can't men just get freaking therapy like us women sometimes? Like, we're more easy to go to therapy than men.
I mean, we're in a good time, actually, especially with mental health being on the forefront. As we saw in the Olympics, you know, Simone Biles had to withdraw from the individual gymnastics event because she was having some mental issues. And so it's a good time, actually. So right now, it's a focus on therapy. And there's a lot of men. I tell my friends to go get therapy. Anybody I talk to, you know, I work a tough job with a lot of tough men. And there's now an emphasis on therapy. So we're in a very ideal time for to tell men to get therapy. And I think men should get therapy. But in the meantime, if you're going to be in a friendship and a relationship, it's almost like that burden is you got to encourage people to talk and to be vulnerable. I do the same thing with my guys. Like when they come and say, hey, what's going on? They're like, yo, I had a long week. Tell me about your long week. How's your relationship? Like really, like you almost have to probe. I get it. It's a lot on the woman to say, you know, to have to carry their emotional state. If you have kids, your kids' emotional state. And the man, but I don't think you realize if you allow the man to be vulnerable and he's comfortable, he'll be that much better of a person and he'll reciprocate it in ways that you don't realize, and it'll be beneficial for everybody in the long run. Because when a guy is, you know, has that shell and he's tough, it's going to be hard to get through, and there's different subtle things that you may not even realize to, you know, could be barriers to your friendship or relationship. However, when you're letting him be vulnerable, man, he'll open up and you'll see another side of him that you never saw before. You know, he'll be comfortable. Like most guys aren't themselves because they're afraid to be vulnerable around women, and so you never fully see the potential of what that guy can be because he has a side that he's hiding and he's protecting himself from, and rightfully so in most cases.
So, and I got some comments here. Shout out to a few of you guys who are in here interactive. We appreciate that. So Amber's like, I'm definitely teaching my son it's okay to cry and ask for help. I agree. We have to teach our kids, the youth, that it's really okay. You know, yes, shout out to Crown Vic. Yes, men do go to therapy now. Yep. It's more, you know, prevalent, but it's still a little bit of a struggle because you feel like, dang, I've got to pay for this service. And I'll revert back to what my grandma said when she found out I was going to therapy. She was like, I could give you advice for free. You could just go to church. And I'd be like, okay, you are not a mental health professional. Right. And so it's going to take, she goes, and so when I finally started going to therapy, she's like, I've been teaching you that for years. I'm like, yeah, but it's your delivery and how you've communicated. You're not a teacher. And sometimes we need somebody to teach us some new skills that we have never, you know, had before. And so I appreciate that. And then I have a couple in here. It's like
Phoebe is saying that, you know, I know she has an issue with her husband, like,
he avoids it.
You know, he avoids it. And I don't know, like, you know, certain things. Sometimes you have to look back in the past and maybe look at his relationship with his parents. If he has brothers, his old friendships. Even you guys' relationship, maybe in the beginning, did he try to be vulnerable and wasn't able to, or has there been? And you know, I'm not saying anything is wrong, but just look back and analyze. Has there been arguments where he's tried to express himself and unfortunately he wasn't able to fully, or you know, even try to push him to, like, you know, towards therapy? Hey, I know this great person, because I feel bad if he's not vulnerable to anybody, because I know from experience, if you're not talking to somebody, whether it's a friend, a therapist, a spouse, the more stuff you hold up, when it all comes out, it's going to be bad. And it's also damaging physically. Mm-hmm. You know, the more stuff you hold in, it starts to eat away at you. And so, you know, like sometimes, like, you have to just try different things, you know, to get somebody to open up, even if it's just a little bit. If someone gives you an inch, you got to celebrate that. That's also another thing. You know, if somebody's vulnerable, you got to say, hey, thank you for telling me that. I really appreciate you telling me. Like, that's interesting to hear. It's like we have to create an environment where a safe space. You have to create a safe space. And if it's just an inch and a little bit, then that's a victory. He says, how was your week? And he says something maybe a little more than he did the previous week. That's a win right there. And you got to just keep getting. You got to celebrate the small wins and someone who's not open.
So, and this is for any of the ladies that's talking about. I know he holds it in and everything like that. It says he doesn't open up. I just want to say, ladies, I'm gonna give you the perspective. Is like, what are you doing? What role do you play in this? You have to focus on what you can control. You can't focus on somebody else and what they're supposed to be doing. You have to focus on what you can control. And once you do that, you can then realize, what can I do that can help me get a different outcome? Because there's a cause and effect that's happening. And so on my end, when I sit back and I look at how I've cultivated relationships, and I'll use it not just in relationships, but like professionally as well, because we do struggle with having a strong voice in the workplace. Women, we struggle with that more than anything. If a guy has a strong voice in the workplace, oh man, you told them. But if a woman is like, oh, she's angry, she's aggressive, she's being too extra, oh, she might be on her period or something like that. So as a corporate professional, I had to learn before I went into entrepreneurship how to properly manage my voice and delivery of that message and trying to tailor it. So a lot of times, ladies, we're trying to take on a leadership role, but we don't even have the leadership skills to lead and guide that man to a vulnerable, safe space either. We quick to point the finger and be like, they did this, they did that, they did this, and they're not trying to evolve. But let's be realistic. We're more complex than what you see with the men. Number one, we're more complex. And number two, on the back end, we are the ones that are the giver of life maternally. The instincts are next level. They cannot compare to a man. So understanding that he is not you and not trying to make him be like you, but trying to help him develop the route to get to the end result. Again, 1 + 9 = 10, 2 + 8, and 5 + 5 = 10. So at that stage of the game, I say to you, how are you inspiring and motivating the guy? Because the reality is, you need to do some work here and here if you think that you're going to raise hell and get the results that you want. It don't work like that. Because I already know, let me tell you something. Our roommate situation, again, the best of friends, the best freaking roommate I've ever had in my life. But if I tell Jordan anything with an iron fist, I automatically am going to receive an iron fist message right back. He's always like super defensive and telling me like, oh, what? You can't tell me. But if I be like, hey, Jordan, I just want to see, this is what I'm thinking. Can you tell me what you think about this or whatever the case is? And he comes back with the softness that I've given him in return. He comes back with a kind, not less smart remark than he normally does. So I'm speaking from experience on this one and in the workplace as well. These vulnerable moments translate to personally as well.
And then Jasmine actually brought up a good point. So the reason why I realize I'm like that is because a lot of men learn communication with the woman from their mother. And like we learn now, a lot of past generations they were just doing the best that they could. And it may not have been the best, it may not have been the smartest, it may not have been the most efficient, but it was the best they could at that given time. And so I learned communication with a woman from my mother, and my mom was always, do this now, do this right now, you got to do this right now. And if I didn't, my mom was a strong disciplinarian, so I would get beat. And so now I realize my rebellious streak, especially when it comes to women, when I get bossed around, is I'm simply rebellious by nature. So if you try to boss me around and do anything, I'm probably not going to do it. And so, when, as Jay just said,
but go ahead.
So when Jay cultivates a softness, like, hey, Jordan, I really appreciate it if you do this, and that, I respond, softly. And so, unfortunately, I get it. It's not necessarily our jobs, but if you really care about somebody, you have to help them, in even subtle ways, unlearn behavior that they become accustomed to. And so because of my mother, she was very authoritarian. When Jay's authoritarian, I get rebellious and I'm like, whoa, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do the opposite. However, when she's like, hey, I appreciate if you do like this, and that, because of this, and that, and we can have a dialogue, then I could be like, you know what, I actually do that. And that's also, that's part of being vulnerable. It's part of, learning whoever you interact with, whether it's a friend, a spouse, a parent, a sibling, is learning how to allow them to, to be vulnerable. And by being soft and creating a safe space and an environment for them to do that. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely a good suggestion, Jeff.
Yeah, and I see also she was talking about, again, advice. Again, this is the shout out to any man who's listening to this. look, take a look at that man's results. Don't get advice from somebody or anybody who has no results to show you. Are they in a successful marriage? Are they happy? Like, here's the reality, okay? When you're dealing with people who are giving you advice but they're unhappy, that's a red flag. Flag on the play, don't do it.
Right.
Okay? So that's something to think about.
Yeah,
but
look at the fruits, man. Look at the fruits. Always look at the fruits.
exactly. Look at the fruits of their labor. So, all right, let's talk about this. Jordan, let's deep dive. When did you first figure out you were struggling with vulnerability? Like, what was an incident where you was like, dang, like, I really need to reevaluate this?
I remember it was two specific incidences. One was at work and one was in a relationship. I remember at work I was dealing with some things at home and it was impacting my work life. And I was missing like I was making a lot of mistakes. I was missing things. I was grumpy on phone calls, and I remember I got in trouble at work, and I had a meeting. At work they document things. You have a meeting. I think I was about to get written up, and they took me to the office and they said, "Hey, you're struggling with this, and that." And in that moment, I think I just lost it. And I was like, "Look, at home I'm struggling with this. I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with that." And they were like, "Well, why didn't you tell us?" And at that moment, I was like, I didn't think anybody cared, but it was like, if you would have, spoke up about what was going on, we maybe would have been more lenient and we'd have been more understanding. And now that we do know this, what we'll do is, we'll work with you and we understand that, this isn't typically your personality because this is like, really unlike you. You've been working here for several years and this is not characteristic, of you. And so because I was just open and it took me getting frustrated to express that and me getting in trouble, that they told me that if you would have been open or just said, hey, I'm dealing with something at home, even if you didn't want to go into details, if you're, I'm dealing with some things, I need some help, that they would work with me. And I know a lot of companies are getting, they're really pumping up their EAP program and trying to encourage people to talk to somebody. And so I should have took advantage of that. And that's when I realized, like, you know what, I really need to, to be more vulnerable. I need to be more open. And coincidentally, the same thing happened in a personal relationship. I was just dealing with a lot of stuff and I wasn't talking and I was starting to go into a depression because I didn't say anything and it was starting to impact the other person. And I would get home from work and they would be like, hey, how was your day? And I'm like, I don't want to talk. And I would go straight to the bathroom and I would just sit there in silence and, just to purge myself from the day. And the person was like, hey, I feel like you don't like me. I feel like, you hate me. And it was in that moment I realized, like, hey, I'm making a big mistake. I'm hurting somebody I care about because I don't know how to talk about it. And all I could do is say, just a simple, hey, I had a long day at work. I'm dealing with this, and that. That person could, I could have changed their entire reaction. They could have felt like, okay, this is not directed at me. Because instead, me and my grumpy and my ornery behavior felt like it was being directed towards them. And that's when I realized, like, you know what? That was a hard lesson because your lack of vulnerability can impact other people, especially the people close to you. That's usually who we impact. And so that was another eye-opening and an experience and a wake-up call for me that, hey, I need to, learn to be more open, especially with the people who say they love me and care about me and I care about them. Because it definitely can bleed over and affect your personal life. And, energy is transferable. Your energy can affect somebody else.
Exactly. There was a comment in here. It says, like, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells and it's tiring. So let me just, again, continue to be as transparent as possible. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells and it's exhausting, then what are you doing to change it? That's the first question I have to ask you. Because a lot of times it's a direct impact on the communication skills and potentially the lack thereof communication skills. A lot of times we're walking around thinking that our shit don't stink. But in actuality, there's an opportunity for learning. There's opportunity for growth. We just haven't had the right person help us uncover that opportunity for growth. And so now we're sitting here like, oh, I'm walking around on eggshells. Okay, well, how many times have you changed your approach? Your way is not the only way. Again, there's multiple ways to get to the number 10. Try a different route. And then if you've tapped out on all the routes that you know, go and tap into somebody who might be able to teach you a different route as well. And ask for maybe a different cognitive thinking training skill that you can help navigate through a little bit better on compassion with your communication and your delivery. So I just say that to say, I'm like, I want to make sure that people are understanding that we're not sitting here telling you like it's that person's fault that they're not vulnerable. We're talking about if you're struggling with vulnerability, how can you identify it? And also if you are someone who's, having a hard time getting someone else to be vulnerable, how can you identify that and navigate around that as well? So let me just tell you, Jordan, Let me tell you the moment I realized that I was struggling with vulnerability.
All right, tell me.
Okay, first off, again, Jordan is from Philly. I'm from New York. Okay, so we have a northern background, and so that's why we get along really well too. Because I'm in the South. We living in the South now. Do it when the South, do as the Southerners. But it's nice to come home and be able to talk shit to somebody, and then not get offended. Because that's a northern way. So apparently, my manager at the time, who is now my business partner, told me the reason why I was not getting promoted was because everybody hated me. He actually said the word hated, that people hated me at my job. And it was hard for me to hear. I asked the question, like, yo, like, why won't you give me a job? Like, why won't you help me get a promotion? Why am I not in a better position? And I opened myself up the floodgates for the hurt, for the vulnerable moment at that moment. And I didn't even realize that I was doing it. But that shit hurt like hell. I was super upset to hear that, like, everybody hated me. Because apparently I was looked at as, like, this super uptight, aggressive, coworker that nobody really want to deal with. Like, I was excellent in my processes. My skills was on point. Like, I outworked everybody in the office. Like, I was a shoo-in for qualifications wise, but the fact that my personality was keeping me from going to my next level was something like an eye-opening experience. Like, okay, I didn't know about how to properly code switch. I hadn't been taught that in the home. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'll be transparent with you. Like, no one ever said, like, hey, you're going to need to get in the corporate world and code switch. No one ever told me how to do that. Yeah. So I had this mentor who's now my business partner. Love him to death. He was like, look, if you want to find better ways of interacting, like, I'll take you on as a mentor and I'll help you. I help you learn a different way. Okay, and I was about 25, 26 years old. So you're thinking, all right, this 25-year-old who's been living my entire life with a very rash mouth and saying whatever I want to say, when I want to say, and very feisty and fighting all the time, was now having to learn at 25 years old and 26 that I maybe got some work to do personally. So once I went through that situation, it actually helped me to learn how to better communicate in my personal relationships too. So it's all interchangeable on how I was interacting, because I was in a situation where I was thinking, all right, cool, like, I really need to be in a situation where I can, like, talk to people, be more open, and, maybe be a little bit more receptive, that I can't keep expecting me out of them.
Yeah.
And that's something I was super guilty of. And I still am a little guilty sometimes. I have to remind myself, like, they don't have the same skill sets as me. They're not on the same page as me and things like that. Okay, so for me, learning how to redevelop it, therapy helped me out a lot. Mm-hmm. You went to therapy.
Yeah.
And it helped me learn. And I didn't just focus on coping skills. See, I don't know, when you went to therapy, did they teach you about, like, cognitive thinking skills and stuff?
Yeah, they did coping and we did cognitive thinking.
Yeah, so that's the key right there, is reframing and, like, different process flows on how to properly frame your conversation with people, and to get, like, a result, like, to motivate and inspire someone to want something a little different.
Yeah.
So what about for you? How did you, like, handle, like, becoming more and more, like, open and vulnerable? Like, how did you get out of your struggle?
I just started being open and seeing what people can handle, and I'll start off with small ways. So when people would say, like, hey, how's your day going, rather than be like, oh, okay, it's good, I'm like, you know what, I had a long night, I'm a little sleepy, but I'm recovering now, I got a coffee. I would just go into a little bit more detail. Mm-hmm. And for the people that I was close to, when they would ask me, I'll definitely start to give them more detail. So a lot of times we give generic answers. In society, we go to work, hey, how you doing? I'm good. Hey, how you doing? I'm good. And I mean, that's all fine and good, but it's most of the time we're lying. And so I realized, the basis to being vulnerable is communicating and being open. And so I tried not to give, cookie cutout answers anymore. Even if, like, even now, someone, tells me something, I'm going to try to give them a realistic answer as possible, and, try to, decipher who I can talk to and give a lot of detail to, and who I can't. But at least at least for myself, sometimes being vulnerable isn't even about other people. It's about being open to yourself. A lot of times we're not open to ourselves. We have this image and this thought in our mind that I'm okay, I'm gonna push through, when we're really tired. And now I'm a firefighter, and so I remember being open and vulnerable actually helped me out. Several weeks ago, about a week or two ago, it was a big fire, and it was hot. And I struggle sometimes with being too hot, ironically, you know. But we were in a fire, and I remember it was fire kicking out the window, and I felt like my energy in my body drained to the point where as I turned to my lieutenant, I said, "Hey, I know you still want to stay in here and fight, and I know if I say I'm tired, we all got to go out, but I'm tired. I'm too hot, and I can't deal with this anymore, and I feel my energy draining." He was like, "Okay, let's go." And we all had to take a break, but we ended up having to go back in. Funny, ironic thing is later on that evening, someone else got too hot, didn't say anything, and they had to go to the hospital because they suffered heat stroke. And so I realized in that moment, me being open and vulnerable and just being like, "Hey, I can't deal with this. I really need a break." It helped save me from a trip to the hospital because in that moment I felt my energy and my body like failing on me. And so, sometimes being vulnerable, honestly, most times will actually help you out. And just being vulnerable to yourself, just being open to yourself and being upfront with how you really feel. Like you get up and be like, "Hey, I'm tired. I didn't sleep good last night. I need to do this, this, and this." Instead of saying, "I'll push through, I'm strong, I'll be okay, I just get a coffee." No, embrace it. I'm tired, I got bad sleeping habits, I go to bed too late, and I'm gonna improve it. And so, that's really what helps me is thinking beyond just the cookie cutout and what I'm supposed to say, and embracing how I really feel. Mm-hmm. And I think that not only just for others, but even for yourself, if you embrace how you really feel, it'll open up a new train of thought and a world to you where you're even discovering new things about yourself.
I agree. And so I appreciate your firefighter experience too. So as a business owner, I've recently become a lot more vulnerable over the last couple of years. And so my business partner, he'll probably shoot me later for saying it, but I don't care. So he pretty much told me that I share too much. Again, he grew up in the era where a man was supposed to be a man. He wasn't allowed to show any weakness. So for him, sharing details that is not pertinent to the next person, the service, or whatever was a really difficult situation for him because he was like, "You sharing too much. They don't even know all the ins and outs." So I remember the first time I had to be really vulnerable in the business and he did not agree with it was when I was hiring on somebody and she was amazing. Her resume was so dope, and she was like, I offered her a rate that she felt wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. And so the pay rate was not enough, but I was like, and she asked me, she was like, "Well, can you offer me more? I do want this opportunity, but I can't work for this." And I was like, "I'm going to tell you right now, I don't want you to think that my offer to you at this pay rate is by any means necessary, devaluing your value. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with you." I said, "The reason why I'm offering this pay rate is because we're a newer company. At the time, we hadn't even been in business a whole year. Okay?" I said, "We're a newer company. We're looking to build something amazing." I said, "If you give me 3 or 4 more months of your time, and while you're working as my assistant, I will go ahead and build a business up enough that I will be able to afford the compensation that you deserve for your work. If you just stick in there with me, then I will let you know." But letting her know that I couldn't afford her real value and that the business was too fresh, too new. Again, she's the outside looking in. My business partner was like, "You don't need to tell her." I said, "No, I'm going to tell her that." And within 5 minutes, we got an email back after I got the phone with her, and she was like, "I accept the position at the rate that you can afford." Because me opening up and saying, times is really tight. We're a new business, again, had not been in business a whole year, mm-hmm. Under the staffing company. And for her to hear me say, "I want to value you, I just can't." And that's not something, again, we don't normally let people see us or our businesses in a light that shows the vulnerability, that shows that we are in a position where we can't afford something. We are always in society pretending to look like we got it when we don't got it.
Right.
Okay, number one. And number two, we're always putting up this poker face like we have it all together when we don't. And that's not just from a personal standpoint, that's a professional standpoint as well. And so I decided I'm not going to fake it until I make it. I'm going to be extremely authentic with all of my employees, even if it pains me. There are times, Jordan helps me out. It's a blessing for me to have not only friends and family work for me, but also to have employees that literally, when their times was rough and I had to furlough people during the COVID, the initial stages of COVID, and nobody was making money, especially not me, it was extremely difficult. And I remember having to tell the employees, like, I can't afford your service right now. Having to be vulnerable and telling the employees that I can't afford to pay you what you deserve, or I can't afford to do that. I said, but I'm going to work my ass off to get this business back to where it needs to be so that I can afford to pay you. And I said, if you stick in there with me and just hold on and can we revisit this conversation? I was so blessed, Jordan, by allowing people to see the vulnerability that was happening in the business during the pandemic.
It worked out.
That not only did it work out, everybody came back. I have an 87% retention rate. You best know this. And on top of it, and not only did they come back, but they blessed me in return. I was getting people saying, hey, I'll work for a few hours for free for you because I believe in this business. I believe in you as a person. And I'm telling you, it gives me chills every moment I think about. I've had at least 7 or 8 employees give me free time to help me rebuild the business during the pandemic because I allowed myself to be open and say, hey, we're struggling right now as a business. I'm not keeping this front. Yes, you are a W-2 employee, but I can't afford you right now, but I want to afford you. I want to get back to where we were. Help me help you. And even then, I had one of my employees, who I hope she's listening right now, she brought me an eggplant Parmesan casserole. You remember that? She came to the house because she knew that times was tough and she was worried about me eating. She was worried because she knew I give my all to these businesses. And during the pandemic, when everything shut down and money was extremely tight, she didn't want me eating ramen noodles. She brought a whole casserole right over to the house and she was like, here, I made this for you. I want you to make sure you're eating good.
Yep. And
to be in a situation where I have people who've only been in my life a couple years, who've been working for me, to do that for me and to show me that love, now we operated at 122% increase after the pandemic has started to now finally fizzle out and slow. Lord willing, it stays like that because Lord, we working still in uncertain times. But to be in a position where my vulnerability has allowed me the opportunity to work, and thank you, Amber, I see you say we got you, to allow me the opportunity to connect with the employees and my friends and people professionally, in general, like other vendors, and being like, hey, I really want to honor this price for you, but my rates are going up because I have expenses that you're not seeing. And again, my business partner didn't understand it when I started it because we came from a corporate world where you had to have a good poker face, you go to do your job, and that's it. Mm-hmm. But in entrepreneurship and small business world, I have to be extremely transparent and open because I had to tell him, and I'm going to tell you, if you're a business owner or you're working through something professionally, the vision is not theirs, it's yours. And they can't see what you see. It's your vision for a reason. So when I'm over here operating in a vision that they can't really understand well, but I need to be able to compensate them for their time. I need to be able to make sure that I'm motivating them to want to continue to work for me. Being open and honest and being human, not just vulnerable, being human, yep, and being able to say I'm struggling has saved me so many times.
Yep.
So many times. And so there's times where Jordan is tired, and I'd be like, Jordan, somebody called out. Can you work this shit? He'd be like, okay. But again, he knows I would not ask and I don't take advantage of them either. I don't take advantage of them. I'm not a taker. I'm a giver. So that's another piece of that.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so I want to hear from you guys. I appreciate you, joining in the live. Definitely let us know what you think about the conversation today. We don't never know if it's going to be 30 minutes, an hour. We just kind of winging it, trying something new. We want to see how we can connect with you guys based on our stories. We're going to talk about some real topics over time. We will upload this IG live to the channel, on our YouTube channel, as well as here on Instagram. And we just want to keep it raw. We're sitting at home, literally,
sure,
with no shoes on. He got his socks. I ain't got nothing on. We're sitting at home. We're chilling. We're vibing. I don't have no makeup on. I mean, my hair always gonna be done. Don't get it twisted. But I ain't got no makeup on. I'm just sitting here vibing. I want to connect with people. I want to know what you guys think. What are you struggling with? And let's talk about it from a female to male perspective. And let's vibe. So, thank you guys. Let us know in the comments on the IG Live that you enjoyed this and that you want to see some more or what you want us to talk about. Send me a DM. And where can they follow you?
My Instagram is Jordy Lamb, JORDYLAMB. It's a picture of me taking a photo. And yeah, follow me there. I'll start posting more. I haven't been as active. I'm not as active as Jay being vulnerable right now. I'm not as active, but I work with the master right here, and I work on being more active and getting more of a presence. But yeah, you can DM me anything, and anything else you guys want to talk about. This is what I'm good at. So I'm trying to focus on what I'm good at. I'm good at just listening and just sharing different perspectives and reframing. I've been through a lot. I know I look kind of young, but I'm a little older. So
he does look young. I know.
So I've been through a lot of things. I got a lot of stuff to share. I think about things differently because through therapy and through reframing and through opening up and being vulnerable. So this would be great. We just want to talk. We just want to share. We just want to just learn, and we all want to grow together. Honestly, we want to help each other become better people and better humans, because the better we are, the better we are for everybody else and everybody out there.
Yep, it's like we're just dropping that one droplet in the water and we'll let it ripple out. And thank you, Amber, for saying it's a great convo. We hope you do continue to tune in. And thank you, Phoebe, for saying we have interesting perspectives. We're not saying we know everything. We're never going to say that. But we're just excited to be able to share something new that maybe you didn't think about. And then you can explore it on your own terms. And we want to hear from you guys.
You may teach us.
That. Yeah, you could share something. Be like, yo, no, try this instead. And we're open to that, because we are wanting to cultivate a safe space of conversation to continue to, cultivate growth and be able to connect with people who are just like us. And so thank you, Vic, for saying it was great.
Thanks, Vic.
And I am Miss Clark. We appreciate you guys for joining the live. Again, share this with somebody who may potentially be interested in, re-listening to this or kind of getting some insight from us. And definitely comment on the IG Live posting. I'm going to hard post it to the page. All right?